right. It's Friday, everybody. You guys got any plans for the weekend?
I mean, there's a Super Bowl or something happening.
Oh,
So
yeah.
probably watch a little bit of football at least.
Yeah.
Just maybe a couple hours.
At the very least, I'll watch some commercials in the halftime show.
Speaking of commercials, have you guys seen I think it's General Motors, those commercials with the cat?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
My streaming services don't include commercials, but
Oh, yeah. All right. I've only seen them like watching the playoffs, and it looks like it'd be a Super Bowl commercial, but it's essentially this cat, and like the guy's doing all kinds of things, and the cat follows him around like a dog. One of them, he's going fishing, and the cat's just like hanging out, chasing stuff, and he whistles, and the cat runs and jumps in his truck. And then another one, they like find a skier buried in snow. The cat finds him, he goes up, and the cat's like digging him out, and the funny part of the commercial is, whoever sees him will always be like, "Oh man, that's amazing." He'll start talking about his truck. He's like, "Yeah, it's a new Silverado." And he's like, "No,
Oh,
cat." And everyone's like, and he's always like, "It's just a cat. I don't get it." But those are my favorite commercial right now.
Apparently, Christy in chat loves them too.
Yeah, they're awesome. I want that cat. Like I've been trying to, train my cat to be that, but I think it's impossible.
Yeah. You don't train cats, man.
No,
cats are what they are.
Cats train you. I've learned.
Yeah.
My cat literally. We've talked about this. Now I'm going to talk about it publicly. But I like to take baths, right? And I enjoy them, especially like on like Fridays. So I take a bath on a Friday, just get a nice slow start to my day. And my cat today just jumped into my bath, like literally, like as the water was draining out of it, and it had like, I don't know, probably like almost 2 inches of water in it. Just jumped in it, was just playing in it, and it was the first time I've seen him do that before. And I was like kind of cracking up, man, because normally cats are supposed to be kind of afraid of water, and he just just loves the idea of the bathtub. He doesn't know what's going on in it. He's like, I want to hang out in that thing, but not when it's full. Just when there's a little bit of water,
a little bit.
Unless you're in it though, then he wants to hang out with you while you're in the bath, right?
Yeah, we've talked about that a bit. My cat will come in when I'm laying in the bathtub and jump on my chest and just lay down on my chest. It's like I'm his little island in the ocean that is the bathtub.
I think that's awesome. It just makes me nervous because how quick and easy cats could startle, that he's going to decide he's got to get out of there real quick and then scratches you up.
Oh yeah. No, I definitely think about it every time. I will say though, like, I don't know, some cats, and I don't think we intended to talk about cats, but here we are. Some cats like are a little bit more quick to do that. My cat's actually very conscious of his claws. Like he does not, like if he's on you and stuff, he will not do that generally. I've never had that. I've had a cat in the past who like literally tore a slice into my chest because he freaked out while he was on my shoulder. But not this one.
That's a good kitty right there.
Yeah, it's a good cat, man.
Yeah. Well, you Pink, any fun cat stories for you, Real?
Yeah, I mean, have had the one that likes to get in the shower with you, but same thing, right? He just kind of stayed back where the water was not hitting, and that was just super awkward first couple times. And I know my wife, one of ours likes to get on the edge of the tub if she's in the bath, right? But he is easily startled. I know he's gotten her a couple times, just like freaking out and taking off, But yeah, other than that, man, I mean, I think we've talked about it before with you guys anyway. But we've got like 15 to 20 or so cats here on the farm, so most of them outside. They're all a whole lot of fun to watch. They're always outside my windows here.
Yeah, nice.
Like Bryce just said in chat, let's segue this into how cats are like the malicious attackers of the world.
Well, we can do that. I mean,
valid,
yeah, they are fierce little murder machines. So
they are murderers, that's for sure.
Yeah.
They don't demand ransom though; they just kill.
Yeah, right. All right, cool. I do have one funny cat story. I'll tell you guys. I'll make it as quick as I can. I have a cat named Whiskey. She was actually a feral kitten that we found, tamed her, and she's an awesome little kitty. But before I could get her spayed, she went to heat, and then we're keeping her inside. You got a vet appointment, and all that, and then she gets out, and like it's the middle of the night. It's like 11:30 or something, and I still lived in the city at the time, and it's like winter time, So I got on my coveralls, I got my big beard, my long hair, and I put on a sock hat. I'm not thinking anything of it. I'm just walking through my neighborhood with a flashlight, going, her name is Whiskey. Here, Whiskey. Where's my whiskey? Where's my whiskey? And and then I spot her like under my neighbor's porch, and I'm like shining that light under my neighbor's porch, and to my dismay, I didn't think about my perception or how she may perceive me, and at midnight looking for my kitty cat.
Looking for
And
whiskey.
so I'm standing there, calling for whiskey.
Yeah.
And so this lady, my neighbor, just comes up and she hits the door like boom, 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 boom from the inside so hard. I literally like jump backwards 2 or 3 feet and throw my hands in the air. I thought I was shot. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa! I'm your neighbor. I'm your neighbor. And she wasn't abused. She was like, okay, what are you doing? Looking for my cat. She's like, I'll keep a lookout. If I see her, I'll bring her back. I'm like, okay, thanks. Going home. See ya. Long story short, I had like we had 4 kittens from her like a few months later. So that's how cats go.
You're trying to tell me that in Kentucky it's a rare occurrence that some guy's walking around at night yelling whiskey? I don't know about that.
Yeah, it depends on where you are. Fair enough. All right, cool. You guys ready to dig in?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So start with a little bit of news for you guys. Story released over the last few weeks about EyeMed being fined $600,000 as a result of a data breach. A little bit of background. EyeMed is an Ohio-based healthcare provider. They were actually targeted. So this goes back all the way to June of 2020. So this was a little bit ago. The attackers were able to compromise a mailbox. And that mailbox, from the way I understand it, was ingesting data sent from clients. So probably like a workflow mailbox, a service account that was set up to receive data that would process and put in the system on the back end. But in that mailbox, there's a lot of sensitive data relating to benefits, enrollments, coverage, and include names, addresses, social security numbers, as well as their insurance account numbers. There were a total of 98,632 residents of New York that were impacted by the incident. So I'm assuming the data was leaked for those residents. And then essentially they got hit from the state of New York with a fine of $600,000. I think this is relevant. We just want to think about how the industry is changing, and we're going to see more things like this in the future. The initial compromise route was on that service mailbox. During the investigation, they did determine that the email account was not secured with MFA. It also allowed public logon via web browser. So assuming they had OA, some web interface to log into that mailbox. And the report also noted that they failed to adequately implement sufficient password management requirements and failed to maintain sufficient logs of their email accounts. So in the dispute, the resolution was they had to pay the state of New York $600,000 to resolve this. Yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it was, that's a pretty big amount, but I think it could have been worse, right? Because like you said, this is mainly New York. I mean, I think there were probably others involved. For me, I don't know, the neat thing was, I mean, neat is relative here, but we see this a lot with business email compromise where they'll, then start to phish your vendors or something like that, right? It's super common. We see it all the time. It's just like try to get in the middle of some other thing or try to compromise another organization. But this time going after patients, I thought was really, really interesting. Like that's just a slightly different tactic.
I think I skipped that point when I was talking through the synopsis here. But yeah, the way that EyeMed discovered they were compromised is because their clients started replying with concerned emails because they had been phished. The attacker used that compromised mailbox to essentially target roughly 2,000 clients of EyeMed with phishing attempts. And yeah, you're right. We see that a lot where attacker gets into a mailbox. They're harvesting information, offloading data, Exfil data from that mailbox, and they only get caught when they start trying to phish again from that mailbox.
Yeah, I mean, they were saying, I don't know how much you covered. I was looking at some of the stuff in the chat and the questions, but I thought it was, interesting that one, they were in there for like a week before doing that other thing before getting caught. They could have definitely lived in there longer, right? It seemed like, and then, but there was data going back 6 years. So that's like, I don't know what they could have found and just sitting there longer without doing that and getting detected. I mean, we see that, I mean, even in our own pen testing and stuff like that, if we get into an email account, it seems like very often people are none the wiser that it happened. You know what I mean? That we're living in an email box or a few email boxes. Yeah, you
usually don't find out until that happens, right? Until they're sending emails to a vendor or something like that, and you get that reply back, that kind of thing.
Right. From the blue team side, from the IR side, I mean, like obviously things like impossible travel and things like that, but like how else are people detecting these types of things, like a login from somewhere else?
I mean, that's it, right? There's, unless you have some logging set up, and And realistically, on most Exchange boxes, on-prem Exchange, people aren't looking at that kind of thing, right? So it is one of the nice things with O365 is you do have all that built in, even if you got to pay more to get, more than 7 days or whatever, but it's there. But yeah, otherwise, I think it's primarily, hey, we got an email from a customer who said they, we emailed them and asked them to buy Google gift cards or, whatever the case is, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I guess there are like opportunities for anomaly identification there, right? So the impossible travel is one. The other we see is, it does log your browser fingerprint. So if you see an anomaly in that browser usage, that's an indicator. And the other one that we see is just anomalies in logon times, right? And we know a lot of times our attackers may be in a significantly different time zone. And so you just look for those anomalies. I think we talk about that a lot when we're giving guidance to people from blue team perspective, like know normal to hunt evil, right? And so it is looking at anomalies.
Yeah, I was kind of hitting that more on the fact that just nobody's checking that until there's a problem generally, right? I mean, it should be, right? Obviously, you should be reviewing those types of things, but generally folks don't know until it's too late.
Mike in chat, we did answer your questions in the Q&A section, so I don't know if you need to go over the answered thing now, but we did answer those. And then Josh was asking, he said organization uses EyeMed. Why am I just hearing about this for you guys now? I would imagine hopefully it's because you weren't affected, maybe your area and stuff like that. I mean, I know that I think I have EyeMed, I believe too, and I don't think we heard about it because of that, because again, non-affected, I believe, but yeah.
It may be helpful to note too. It looks like there's some other. There are multiple EyeMeds. Someone posted a link to another one from before, right? This is EYE Med MED. So
it's the same. I know that other link says EyeMed, but it's also
sorry.
Both the 2020 data reached about 600K. I don't know what the situation is between the different names, but yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would say too, if you're concerned, reach out to EyeMed and share the information you have, and we'll send out synopsis and notes on this as well, and ask if you were affected. They should disclose that. Another thing I thought was interesting is there was a statement made by the New York Attorney General. She said, "My office continues to actively monitor the state for any potential violations, and we will continue to do everything in our power to protect New Yorkers and their personal information." I think they're setting a precedent here, and I fully expect that precedent will be followed by a lot of other states, right? I think this one's important, right? Because when we look at this case, everything that happened here are things that we kind of continually talk about to you guys here and through all the materials that we put out at FRSecure and doing those best practices, right? And I think we're going to see that shift where if you don't follow those best practices, you can't prove that you're adequately logging and monitoring, then we're going to see more retribution and financial liability put back on those organizations, and because of the idea of negligence.
Yeah. Well, and I think you probably said something about it, but they found that it wasn't secured with MFA. And I think we see this more, obviously people are pushing to MFA on accounts and things like that, but it's also one of those things where it was likely, or it seems like, at least from the usage of this account, what kind of account it was probably shared with some people. And a lot of people don't want to put MFA on a shared account, because then who gets the MFA question? How do you circulate that? How do you deal with that and things like that? And I mean, I think, there's other ways to handle it, right? You could have something that, it's a distribution list to certain places, or it automatically does some kind of flow to put things in places, and it's not an account that can be logged into, and then people still have to use their own MFAs to get access to that box. I mean, there's options, right?
For sure.
If you're anyone out there who's got something like that, you're like, well, we have rules in place that these certain boxes aren't MFA'd because they are jointly accessed or something like that. Figure out a solution, because those do get found a lot of times, especially because if they're a shared inbox or mailbox or something like that. Not only do they not have MFA because of that frustration, but then there's also well, it's got to be maybe an easier password for people to understand or remember, or things like that. And we start to break down so many rules in place for these types of things to accommodate these things, that all of a sudden we have a pretty weak link out there. So keep all that in mind.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. And then even from that count, from this perspective too, I know that you can restrict specific logon types for an email account, right? And so we're looking at the service email account. I don't see any reason why it should have been able to log in from web interface, right? So understanding maybe you do have those accounts that are required, that are a little more challenging to secure. Well, don't give that account public logon access. So that's going to lower that footprint a little more.
Yeah. Yeah, and Curtis said in chat, you should use a shared mailbox. I mean, we don't know exactly what the situation was from. We're drawing some conclusions based on some things. I don't want to act like this is knowledge we know about this environment, but in general, people out there who are in that similar setup that we kind of just described, yeah, shared mailboxes definitely is an option.
Yep, agreed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and going back to just kind of continuing here, we do see in a lot of cases like these service accounts are a problem, and I'm sure you sit on the red team, I'm sure you sit on the blue team, pink, but we'll see. Yeah, we've implemented MFA across the board, and then you go through and look at that MFA profile, and you realize, well, there were these 3 accounts that were exceptions. Oh, well, those are just service accounts. We didn't implement there. So I think that we all need to understand that service accounts shouldn't be an exception to best practice. We see incredibly old password age. We see exceptions to policies. We see all kinds of bad practices, sharing those accounts and those passwords across the board. A lot of lost passwords associated with service accounts over the years. And so people are afraid to reset them because they don't know where they're tied to. And there's just tons of issues. But I want to just say they should not be an exception to your best practice.
Yeah. No. I've had so many accounts about at least internal Active Directory, Windows domain service accounts, passwords and stuff like that, where it's just you see so commonly when I'm in those environments, and I'm sure many people that are listening in on this right now are like, oh yeah, we have those. It's just you have these service accounts with passwords haven't been set since 2006, 2009. And then when I get into them, and then I recommend that you change those, and you actually have a policy about changing those, and the people are like, well, I don't even know how it would break so many things.
Yeah.
And it's well, then there's a flaw in the way it's set up in the first place. You know what I mean? But it's still, it's painful. We understand that, but yeah.
Yep. I've heard it from this perspective, we can't change that because I have no idea what it's going to break. It's well, yeah.
Maybe it's time to hit that disable button to find out, then work backwards. But I mean, and we're all ex-sysadmins in some fashion or another, right? So we get it. I mean, we know the difficulties there. It's just, we gotta fix that. It's a huge problem.
Yeah. Well, it stems from having these accounts that are used for 50 different things, right? We don't want to create more service accounts. We'll just use the one we already have. Well, why not? Create new ones, give them granular permissions for only what they need, yada, yada, instead of having one DA account somewhere that's being used for everything.
Yep. Yeah, I would say just thinking about too, back to this attack and maybe moving off the service account, but detection opportunities. We talked about the anomaly tracking. I think that anomaly tracking also applies to mailbox behavior. And so if this account isn't typically sending out a mass blast of 2,000 emails, well, that's an anomaly. And there are ways that you can track that through your messaging monitoring system, right?
Yeah. I mean, in this particular case, they did note that they were cited for failing to maintain adequate logging of their email accounts too. So probably the only way they were probably going to find out about this one, unfortunately, was the fact that customers started sending them emails concerned about it. But
yeah, and that brings up another good point too, the inadequate logging. I think a lot of folks that we interact with on blue team side, Pink, you probably talk about this a little bit more, are totally unaware of what those logging policies are. And when we look at the default logging policy that's set up, there's a lot of really good capabilities there, but the retention of that is really, really short, right? Is it 30 days, 15 days, depending on the license?
Yeah, it depends on your license. I've seen as short as 7. I've seen as much as 90 in sort of the main interface, right? And take this how you will, but Microsoft does have a sort of a SIEM product now where you can feed those logs in and pay them more to retain them for a longer time. But there are other solutions there too. There's ways that you can do that yourself, or plug it in your own SIEM and things like that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times we get in there and it's a 7-day log, and I mean, we're probably finding out about this more than 7 days after it happened, generally, right? So we're at that point, we're struggling to go back and figure out what happened, figure out what's going on. And I mean, we say this a lot on the blue team side. I mean, realistically, if the evidence isn't there, it's just not there. I think it's hard for a lot of people to accept. But if you weren't logging, there's no way for us to go back in time. There are always forensic artifacts in different systems, but when we're talking about these cloud systems, it's usually not there. There are some tools. We mentioned this a lot. It's one called Hawk and one called Sparrow. Both of those seem to be able to pull a little more data than you're able to see in the interface. I don't know if it ties into the API and some things happen there, but always recommend you run those, try those out, and kind of like Oscar said, get your baselines, figure out your normal, right? But yeah, logging is always a problem, and I mean not just with these cloud services, but yeah, it is tough, right? I mean, we get asked a lot for, can you kind of give me a universal logging recommendation? And the answer is generally no, because it's different on every system you have. But just it's important to go in there and find those, figure out what you have, and turn on and crank it up to the max if you can.
Mhm. Yeah, we're not saying you have to go buy an upgraded license or even a solution at this point. Like if you don't have the budget to do that, you can offload those logs to local storage, and that will be enough for us in the event of an incident that you've pulled those down, you've retained them even in just text file format. So we have that artifact and we can investigate.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, cool. So lessons learned, MFA, everything, block public access to service accounts or any account that doesn't need public access. Service accounts are an exception to best practice. Monitor, know normal, spot anomalies, know your logs. Oh yeah, monitor for mass outbound emails.
Is there going to be a quiz on this?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah. I've actually already typed the questions up, and I'm going to send it to you guys after we're done, and then we're going to share the results with everybody's ears today.
My response: turn it off.
Yeah.
Just turn it off.
In an ideal world, how long should an organization retain their logs? How much time typically passes between the beginning of a breach and the breach being discovered? What's the average dwell time you guys see?
Yeah, I always like to say as much as you can afford. Storage is cheap right now. And so I've seen cases before where the dwell time did exceed 12 months. That is an anomaly. It's not typically that long, but it is, common that we see attackers are in your environment for months before they actually execute their final payload. And so I would say, at a very minimum, if you have 6 months, we're going to be happy with that. Then beyond that, what can you afford is going to build that question.
Yeah, I'd say too that some logging things, not like maybe email logging and stuff like that, but in other places a lot of times it is kind of restricted by size, and just be careful of those kinds of things, because especially in some situations where a breach starts happening or something, there's actually people attacking, logging goes through the roof, right? It increases the amount of logs, and all of a sudden I've known people are like, oh yeah, we keep logs for a month, which is still not enough, but then like it's actually about a month average based off the normal throughput of their logs, because it's actually size limited. And as soon as the breach happens, their logs only last 2.5 days or something like that, and then there's an issue. So
that's particularly a problem with Active Directory domain controllers, right? So they're processing all of the security requests in the environment. So if something happens on your domain controller, like it gets compromised and we need to go back and look at security logs for that, oftentimes we only have a couple of hours.
Yeah, it's common for web logs too.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that's why logging is a really deep subject. Honestly, we could probably sit here and talk for a couple hours and the different aspects of that and that kind of thing. But yeah, just as a baseline, like Oscar said, as much as you can, if at all possible. And
and I like to talk about, like storage is cheap. Offline storage is really cheap right now. And you look at, like, say you got an old tape library, and we always bang on those offline backups. And hopefully everybody on this call now, they've got that old LTO drive backup and they're backing up to tape now. That's awesome. You guys pat yourself on the back. Good job. You can also dump your logs there. We really don't care when we're coming in as, from a forensic standpoint, like what format they're in. We're just happy to have those logs. Even if it takes a little more time for us to massage that data, and there is hours spent getting there, having it is invaluable.
Yeah.
I would like to know how many people knew what an LTO drive was when you said that, but I don't think we've got time to run that poll.
Everyone's going to say yeah now because you just said that.
True. That's true. That's a good point.
All right, cool. So let's boogie on to another thing. News story popped recently about attackers essentially using a 20-year-old tactic in Microsoft 365 phishing campaigns. Like Eric made a really good point. Like, I don't know why they narrowed this to Microsoft 365, because it's just phishing in general. So, and we did kind of talk about this. Eric brought it up when we were talking about the homoglyph attack a couple months ago, using some RLO. And so, right to left. It was very popular in the 90s. You can masquerade files to look like something else by essentially flipping those bits. So executable can look like a text file. In the case of these current phishing attempts right now, they're essentially making an HTML file that appears to be a WAV file. And so from my understanding, and I'll let Eric explain it more, there's essentially, Unicode character that you can place in a string, and it'll flip the characters after that string, the orientation. So it goes right to left rather than left to right, which is where oriented in reading. And so if you have, HTML dot wave, or it'd be backwards, right? You could flip that. So the file would say HTML.wave, but in reality, it was a VAW or wave.html when you execute that. So when you run that file, it's going to execute as an HTML file. And in this case, they're sending folks to a fish site for O365 and asking for your login creds. Looks like it's a voicemail. It's not. It sends you to log in to retrieve that voicemail. When you log in, then they essentially have your creds at that point.
Yeah, like I was just saying, we talked about it before. The thing we had talked about before was this kind of same thing being used in GitHub repositories and things like that to make it look like there were comments at the end of the line, but in reality that was flipped. And so it was actually doing some kind of including that in a string or something like that. The code was a little different. And I had mentioned at the time, we use this in email phishing occasionally. You can do that kind of a thing right in the middle of a file name, and it'll flip things around, like you said. So the way it's going to look, obviously, in the file name is that your extension is going to be backwards near the end. And so sometimes, you can get a little creative with the naming. Let's say I wanted to send you a PDF about some changes in our expectations for your professionalism, right? Or something like that, right? Well, if you did something like that, you can do expectation of professional and then reverse it and do fdp.msi. And all of a sudden, MSI backwards is ism. Great thing to end words with.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And, and now when you look at that, it looks like expectations of professionalism PDF, given an icon for executable to look like a PDF. You look at it, you're like, it looks like a PDF to me. You click on it and open it, right? Now, obviously, in those situations, people are using binaries. Binaries get caught a lot, things like that. And so in this one, with like Oscar was talking about, they're using the HTML. It's hidden as a wave or MP3 voicemail type thing. The neat thing about that as an attack too is that having something like 3 p.m. at the end of your voicemail name or something like that, or VAW or sorry, HTML backwards, right? LMTH, things like that. Like that's not going to really throw you off. Like if you ever received a voicemail attached to your email, like I get them all the time. I mean, they're like this random group of numbers and letters anyway, right? So you don't really think of it too much, and you just see it. And it looks like a .mp3 or wave. So you click on it, HTML loads up without being a binary or anything like that, and it can phish you pretty good. So it's an attack to definitely watch out for. Just be aware of, and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, and what surprises me about this is, this has been known for a really long time. No fix is really expected. It's just the way things operate. But I am surprised. I did a little bit of research. Like, there's not a lot of filtering going on right now that I understand. That's just scanning, attachments for Unicode characters, and specifically that Unicode character. Right. And I feel like there is an opportunity for a signature based approach as we're scanning files to specifically, let's look for that U+202E and see if that character is injected. If so, then let's scrutinize that file a little more. I don't know of any valid reasons why that RLO Unicode character should be used in a file name that's traversing into email systems in North America. Other places, sure, I get that. But from here, primarily domestic only entities, is there a valid reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. And I mean, even then you could say outside of America, I mean, worldwide, is there a situation? I mean, I don't know. I have no clue. But I mean, is there actually ever a situation where you're going to have a single line of text, a file name that's going to have the text that goes left to right and text that goes right to left?
Right.
Yeah. The flip is the weird thing, right? Because I mean, obviously, for I think it was Arabic languages and Hebrew, you need that. But if there would be a kind of like you're saying, a signature based way to look at that flip in there in the middle would be interesting. I
gotta imagine that's a very rare occurrence if in reality, right? Like, so
sure.
I'd rather rule on the fault of accidentally denying some things that were valid than if we get 98% of these things that are actually malicious.
I'm a big fan of less emails in general, so just flag on everything. I'm fine with that.
If it's got a subject, just get rid of it. Yeah.
We turned it on and we no longer get email. Work is easy.
It's working.
Works as intended.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. We just wanted you guys to be aware of that. So if you see funny, phishing emails or funny emails that say you got a waiver and MP3, inspect that. And really just in general, you should always be looking at those attachments. We always say don't open attachments from untrusted sources or even from anyone that you do trust that you're not expecting that attachment. I'm overly cautious about that. And I see a lot of folks in my org, if they send me things I'm not ready for or expecting, I'm going to scrutinize that before I interact with that file and validate that should have been sent to me and it was legitimate. I don't know. I'm sure you guys.
It's actually pretty common, I think, in our organization now that if I send, like, if any one of us sends anything that's out of the ordinary that people wouldn't necessarily expect, to like follow it up with like a message being like, "Hey, that wasn't me phishing you just now."
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I use that as an excuse to not, read things like, that Oscar sent to me to, here's your performance improvement review or something like that, right? Just, I'm not going to open that. Yeah.
No, that was obviously phishing. I didn't click on that.
Yeah.
Oscar actually just asked me a couple of weeks ago if one of the employees on my team had his email compromised because he was sending weird things, and I was like, no, he's just weird.
Yeah. It was cryptic, and I'm like, what is going on here? It took me a little bit, but then I finally called on. When in doubt, though, you just meme it. I think I just sent a meme back. I was confused.
Yeah.
I popped in my favorite John C. Reilly meme, and I think everybody understood. All right, cool. Let's tell another story here. A little piece of positive news. I feel like we always deliver the bad news, but I think this next story is a great thing. I was happy to hear this. I don't know. Hopefully, nobody on the call observed this because you were already using multi-factor in your Google accounts. But if you weren't, Google auto-enabled two-step verification for over 150 million users. It's awesome. I'm super happy to see that. I think it's progress in the industry. So now when users log on who weren't previously enrolled in MFA, they're going to be forced to enroll essentially in two-step notification. I wouldn't really call it true MFA, but it's a push notification. So they have to approve that on another device that's already been authorized to that Google account. They have noted that they plan to do this to continue this rollout. I don't know if that means that it will be for all users. What that plan is, but that I think is a piece of positive news as well. And then to no one's surprise, they also announced that since they rolled this out, they've saw a significant decrease in account compromise. Shucks, who would have known, guys?
Yeah, it's not like that MFA is helpful for anything at all. So yeah, I know. I agree, man. Great thing. Love to see this. So
yep.
Yeah, and they're enforcing it too, right? It's not just a suggestion.
No, they're just auto opting people in at this point. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things, a lot of services out there. I wouldn't know because I use multi-factor on everything. I don't. But that said, on a lot of things, the important things I do. That said, there's a lot of services out there though that are doing at least similar things, right? Like, are you coming from another IP? Well, then we're forcing an MFA of some kind, right? Like a second factor. And I think that's really helped the industry in general. I like seeing more and more of these things that are just in general pushing toward that, kind of forcing people to be safer than they would do on their own, so it's good. And a lot of incentives. I mean, like, I'm a person who plays video games and stuff like that. There's a lot of video game companies out there right now that are incentivizing people to enable two-factor, right? If you do this, we'll give you this, or you'll have this extra benefit or something like that. And I love seeing stuff like that. It's just like, a lot of people need to be incentivized. Unfortunately, it is what it is, right? So I like seeing that the industry is moving in those directions and really taking that route. Like, I know, like, for instance, it's tangenting a little bit, but it's just talking about these types of things. Steam, very popular video game platform, right? My son's account didn't have MFA enabled. Well, because it wasn't enabled, if he wanted to sell something on it, he had to wait like 2 weeks for it to clear, right? So it's like kind of giving that punishment of like, hey, but if you enable this, then you can just go ahead and do it normally. We don't have to worry about your account as much, So
yep. Yeah, I love that. I think it's I just feel like movement is progress. Any movement is good. And so to see this from a major player like Google, hopefully others will follow suit as well. The other thing I thought was really awesome when I was reading about this is there was a study that was done by Cisco Systems Duo Labs throughout the United States and the UK on MFA. And what was really interesting is that in 2017, only 28% of the population that was surveyed was aware of or have used multi-factor authentication before, like about a quarter of us, right? And that's 2017, 5 years ago, not too long ago. Last year they did the same study again, and they determined that 79% of the population has at least used MFA one time. And so that means at least now we got almost 80% of our population that are aware of what it is. And I think that's awesome. I mean, those are the things that we always talk about we want to happen. It's really good to see progress right now. That makes me smile.
Yeah,
Got a
that's
question here. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say I hadn't really thought about it. That kind of tracks with what we've seen. I remember, early on doing investigations and providing recommendations at the end and saying, hey, you need to turn on multi-factor for these accounts, or whatever the case is, or phrasing it as MFA. And we would get a lot of questions on, what is that? How do we do that? That kind of thing. I just realized we've not had that in a while. Most people, we just say, yeah, you guys need to turn on MFA. They go, oh yeah, we're already working on it. It's in the plan or something like that. So yeah, I guess it is pretty good progress, but yeah, go for the question there, Eric.
Yeah, good question. Talking about MFA, do we recommend hardware MFA or app-based?
Yeah, just do it right now and do what works for you. And there are benefits to both of those. Like the YubiKey stuff is really cool. I mean, I think that's a nice technology and it works too. There is risk associated with hardware and the fact that, people lose things, obviously. A lot of times it is hard to relate a lost MFA device to who actually owned that unless you were specifically targeted, which doesn't happen a whole lot. App-based, we've talked about there are opportunities for misconfigurations when you're just relying on the software. Like if we're talking the application is O365, for example, and like Eric could tell a lot of fun stories about how push notifications are defeated quite often. But like authenticator apps, that's it's pretty damn good too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with 100%. Just do it. Just do something. I am a fan of the YubiKeys. I use those. I know that they've been used in some pretty big environments very successfully, or keys like those, right? But at the same time, there is the issue of like losing them and stuff like that. Like I make sure to have multiple extras and locked away somewhere that I can get to them if I need to, but not available that I would just lose them and not know that they were lost or something like that too, But at the end of the day, just be using something, and preferably not the push, because it does get kind of taken advantage of pretty often.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And just for anyone listening, the push thing is just that people get so used to just accepting the dang push that we found multiple times on phishing or general like red teaming and stuff like that, where we can just kind of be persistent or do it at the right time of the day, like right when people are starting work for the day or right when they're getting back from lunch. We go to log into the thing and they're like, oh yeah, I did just log into my computer. I guess it's asking me again for something, and they just accept it. And so the push popping up and then just pushing accept does get compromised fairly often in my experience.
Yeah, and to be clear, I mean, I think probably pretty clear here, but just the push ones are the ones that you get on your phone and say, hey, somebody's trying to log in with your Microsoft account, do you approve, or whatever, your Google account or whatever, that, as opposed to the code based, here's 6 characters, drop those in.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's still way better than not using anything, but
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we are creatures of habit. I know so many people just get used to saying like, hey, that's a comfortable thing. That's a product I use. It's asking me. Yeah, sure. I thought I already told you that today. No big deal. Let me tell you again. You can get in there.
So. Well, especially if you're using a solution like we've used in the past where it'll continue to ask you, like, hey, do you want, you're still signed in, right? Do you approve this? Do you approve this? And if it's going to ask you every hour on a VPN or something like that, with all the work from home that's going on, that's going to be something we just start to push just normally, right? So,
yep, agreed. All right, cool. So, yeah, nothing else on that. Let's move on. This one's pretty interesting. New tactic for data exfil, among other things, using PowerAutomate and Microsoft 365. It's a new attack pattern that's been somewhat recently observed. Essentially abusing PowerAutomate, which used to be known as Microsoft Flow. I'm not a big user of that, so when I started reading this, it was interesting. I knew it was an application that was available. I've never really utilized it, but yeah, it's an application that's used so you can create flows between Office or Microsoft applications, specifically I think Outlook, SharePoint, OneDrive, so you can automatically share files, share information, or share emails or forward emails, right? So essentially, threat actors have found a way to abuse Flow to use that feature for data exfiltration. And it's totally going to evade your DLP, right? So it looks like it's living within that Microsoft ecosystem. It's not typically going to fire your DLPs. I have seen, like in the article we were looking at here, they did talk about it could be used for C2 communications, lateral movement as well. I think I haven't observed how that is the case. If you guys have, it'd be fun to talk about that. But yeah, that's the kind of high level of what flow is and what they're using it for. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about how it works, right? So say you compromise a user account and we get access to that mailbox or that O365 implementation. So you also have access to Microsoft Flow or PowerAutomate. We'll use those words simultaneously here, synonymously. So then you can use that account access to create flows within the Flow UI or even on the back end through the graphical, the API. Once you create those flows, essentially you can say, all right, for this user's compromised mailbox, we're going to forward all those emails to attacker mailbox. And this is different than tactics we've seen before, where attackers were attacking forwarders to the user or mailbox level, because these are not observable at the user or the mailbox level. They're only observable through that flow UI. The same thing can be done with emails for SharePoint. And so say, for example, the user's compromised, the attacker can essentially set up forwarding rules. Let's just say there's a SharePoint site the user has full access to that will essentially offload anonymous sharing links for everything in that SharePoint folder that user has access to, essentially to an attacker server. So the attacker can then harvest all those links and access those files as if they were that user through the anonymous links. The other thing that's crazy is once they set up that flow, anytime a new file is added to that SharePoint, that a new link gets sent out, it's anonymously shareable or accessible, and the attackers essentially get continuous access into that data repository. Clever, really clever.
Yeah, I don't know all the triggers that are set up too, but I would assume you could probably, wouldn't even have to be a new file. You could probably just do on file modification or on file access or something like that as well. Yeah, it's super interesting. I know I mentioned it to one of our clients yesterday, and the response was, "Oh, yeah, of course you could do that. That makes total sense." Just kind of one of those things that hasn't hit anybody yet. But yeah, it's really powerful and pretty concerning, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought when I was looking at that, I was just like, this is yeah, I mean, you could do a lot of stuff. I mean, like, it's meant for automation and workflow, right? So it has a ton of features you want to do things with, and I could see plenty of good reasons to use it. But the ability to be able to, I mean, like when you're doing this and like he was saying, you could harvest these links and stuff. I mean, like, because it has the option to say, hey, do a post method request to this URI with these headers and this stuff in the body, right? And like literally tell it exactly what to send and post to an API that you're controlling somewhere. And so yeah, there's a lot of potential impact for if someone wants to compromise these. And to compromise it, they just need a username and password that they were able to phish or spray for. Or they even had an example in there as having malicious Azure apps. If an attacker set up their own malicious Azure app and then phished you with it, and you clicked on it and you accepted it because of whatever that social engineering pretext was, made you do that. Once you do that, it could potentially do some stuff too. They did say that part of it was limited to only being able to modify flows that had already been created, not create new ones. But I mean, still,
yeah, absolutely. And I know, like, one of the things that they do talk about in here too, and this is, I think, if you've not experienced SharePoint, if you've not tried to manage, an O365 SharePoint environment, they're pretty difficult to manage, right? To me, it's unnecessarily complicated. And so, keeping track of those permissions, like Oscar mentioned there, right? If that user gets compromised and they just happen to have permissions to everything, right? You can get everything, so you're going to want to lock those down as best you can, like everything else. But I do know that it can be really tough in those environments.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think too, like, we're seeing this, my thoughts are, it's a very typical attacker technique to set up those email forwarders, right? Or they were setting up some RSS feeds at the user level or the mailbox level before, People are getting really good at saying, hey, well, they're getting better, right? At saying, let's monitor for those, let's look for any anomalies. And, through a lot of the tools I think we've shared with you guys here, it's a little easier to regularly check for that. And so I'm not surprised that they're pivoting to a new, more effective method. I think from my understanding too, like, to see this activity, right? So you have to be logging that flow, or the PowerAutomate. And a lot of people may not even realize that is a function that's auto-enabled in their 365 suite by default, because a lot of people aren't familiar with it. A lot of people aren't using it. So they're probably not looking at that activity. So it's really easy. Like if we go back to that first thing we talked about today, if you're the attackers in that EyeMed case, if you get in and you use this technique to set up those flows, I mean, theoretically, like you could sit there for years, a really long time harvesting data, and no one knows that you're harvesting their data. So I think this is, it's kind of a challenge. People aren't used to flow. They're not familiar with flow. So let's try to get people to start hunting that. I think that, if you're not using flow, find out in your organization and shut it down. Like we talked about that with everything, right? No need to leave these unused applications available if you don't need them. I can say that I was researching how to shut that down a little bit, and it's not easy. Like typical Microsoft, right? They're not going to make it easy to opt out of the applications within that suite. They want you to have that functionality and that availability because that's Microsoft. There is some options to shut that down via the PowerShell API. So we are going to work in the next couple of weeks to get an article out about that, and we'll share that with everyone so you can have those instructions along with the synopsis of this attack to hopefully be able to shut down that functionality if you're not using it.
Yeah, I mean, just as a little plug, right? We should have later today. I've got to review it. One of our guys wrote up a quick rundown of this attack, and should be going up on our Project Happy threat feed this afternoon. So,
yep,
should be there.
Yeah.
I'm curious if, like, I don't know, I haven't dug around with it, and I will be messing around it in my Microsoft sandbox that I have, but I'm curious to know how much data you could do, or how much like parsing of information you could do in an email. Because I also wonder, like, if you could do something along the lines of setting up a workflow that said, when an email is received, if it has this in the body of it, then do this, because then you could potentially even have it send out emails on your behalf whenever you wanted to certain people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of have conversations, or if you had one that forwarded emails to you, be able to reply from that person without having to actually log in or even continue to have a login. Because once that flow's set up, they could change the password and you still have access to do that stuff,
Exactly.
So very interesting.
Yep. Other mitigating controls, like we talked about, automate or audit PowerAutomate, right, in your environment. Look for any flows that are created, make sure they're valid. Really check those out. Monitor your logs again. That does take a log on or an authorization from a third-party app, and so those are things that are detectable. That could be anomalies there. I also know you can block emails from PowerAutomate too. So if you don't have the ability to shut down the PowerAutomate function, don't allow that function to send emails. So that can at least stop that forwarding piece. It's not going to save you from the SharePoint side of this if they're trying to essentially harvest your SharePoint data. But that is another option you could consider. All right, cool. Anything else you guys got on that one?
I was just gonna say on the login. I'm not sure. I was actually just kind of looking at this again. I think it does at least log the login activity, right? So it'll show like Azure Active Directory PowerShell or something like that. But you may not get the activity log from PowerAutomate as to what was taken, right? You may just be able to see an anomalous login kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, definitely look for those Azure Active Directory PowerShell logins and stuff in general in your Azure logins. But yeah.
All right, cool. Boogieing along, I think we got two more quick hits. One is, I think these are both going to be PSAs. The last PSA, guys, I just threw it in while we were talking. So
I was like,
I was looking at my notes.
One, there was a critical Samba vulnerability recently released with I think it was a CVE 9.9. It essentially allows RCE if a user has modification to file attributes. You can essentially execute arbitrary code. So the two things I would say is be aware of that. Patch your Samba for sure. Don't put Samba on the internet. too, right? So if you have Samba shares on the internet, maybe don't do that, right, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't have SMB, you probably shouldn't have Samba either. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, so I had a little bit of a curveball on the SMB on the internet thing that happened in a recent case, and it's something because we always say that, right? I mean, don't have SMB on the internet. That's at this point, that's sort of a base level of security. Don't do that. Ever since WannaCry, let's stop. But an interesting one with a laptop for someone who worked from home, right? So they apparently had it enabled for whatever reason. And so when they're on a corporate network, they're on VPN, that kind of thing, it is blocked from the internet. But as soon as they disconnect from that and they're just sitting on their home machine, it was advertising that port. And so that was kind of an interesting thing that I hadn't really ran into before, at least didn't, that I can recall. So provided a potential way into that machine initially, and then hey, when they hop back on the corporate VPN, then they're there. So you're going to want to maybe take a look at some of your employees' laptops, that kind of thing. Make sure you're disabling that group policy, PowerShell, or Windows Firewall, things like that. Whatever you can do to kind of prevent that instance. So still shouldn't really be on a workstation, but it happens. So
yeah, that's interesting, but that would be SMB and not necessarily like Linux, Unix, Samba, or Mac. Yeah, but that is an interesting situation anyway. I mean, that would have to be one of those situations where I think your home internet, you'd have to be passing the external IP over to the machine itself, not to like as a router or something like that. And then
I wonder if they were plugged directly in, or something to that effect, right? It was really odd, but it was
it'd have to be that plus then setting it as a trusted network, and then it would do that. Yeah, which used to be
I've seen that very similar before, days of old, where just like somebody set up their home network and didn't realize what they were doing. They were trying to set up file sharing for like media and things like that, so they could hit it, their movies from somewhere else or their music from somewhere else. They inadvertently opened up SMB shares to their primary workstation, which also included work data at the time on there. And so it could be a case like that too, where the folks just don't realize what they're doing. And I think that's a risk we go back to for at home. Like people try to learn to work more efficiently. They do things on their own. And so, yeah, it's a big exposure.
Yeah, I'd say with the Samba thing too, just keep in mind that some common configurations will have guest access with these permissions too. So it doesn't even require authentication in those situations. I know that my Samba that's open to the internet is set up that way.
Yeah.
What's the IP of that one again?
You'll know the IP because if I happen to use it for a print nightmare attack on you, that's how you'll know it. Yeah.
So I was thinking about this for our listeners, right? So the main risk here is that equivalent, like if you have an everything share, right? So if you have a share with folder permission that allows full read write access for guests, or even if you just have a file in that share that has full read write access for guests, then you're going to be vulnerable or susceptible to this attack. Hopefully no one here has this SMB shares available on the internet. So at this point, it would mean that you'd have to have an attacker on your internal network to be able to exploit that anyway. So do your diligence, patch that. And then while you're at it, like don't have everyone shares anyway. Don't give those guests or default permissions across the board, because really if you're operating in a business environment, they're unneeded at that point. Any user that's accessing those files should have credentials and should be able to authenticate.
Yeah, that's another one that Microsoft made sort of complicated over the last, I don't know, probably the last 10 years really too, is how you set those up for everyone to be able to view, so they can get to the HR share, or see the HR shares there but not access it. So just be a little bit careful as you're setting those up, and if you have questions, then talk to somebody who's done that, because it can get a little bit tricky. But absolutely get rid of those everyone shares right now.
All right, cool. My last thing is just a PSA that we say almost every time. Like you hear the recurring themes. We talk about MFA a lot, so do that. And then also, you heard me mention LTO again today, but I have to say this again because we are, constantly dealing with incidents, and we're seeing people get severely damaged because of not doing this. And that's get your backups offline, please. People, get your backups offline. Attackers in these ransom cases that we continually work, if they're to the point of deploying ransom, they're going to find your backups first, and they're going to encrypt your backups before they ransom, and then we're up shit's creek. So please get your backups offline. That's my PSA.
Good PSA, man. I mean, I know all of us when we see this and we see it happen, it hurts, right? I mean, we don't like to see this happen to anybody, things like that. But you're absolutely correct. They will always go after them, and offline means offline. If your backup company has a problem with it, tell them to come talk to us. We'll explain to them that network connected is not air gapped. It is not offline. So
yeah, and somebody asked about immutable backups. The reality of immutable backups is still there's going to be an administrator account that does have the ability to modify those directories and those files at the core level. And so as long as that exists, it is network connected, those immutable backups can still be destructed. That's essentially, the goal. And we use some immutable storage here, and I've gone through that to understand like immutable is great. But immutable is still susceptible for destruction once they get, the power user or the admin user to access those immutable folders and the structure and the hierarchy above. And we're seeing people, they don't just go after those files, they're going over this after the systems that contain those files and destructing those systems as well. So offline is offline. Get it on a tape, get it on a disk, pull it offline, make sure it's not network connected or network accessible in any way at all.
So you're saying immutable is great until it's mutable.
Until it's mutable, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing too with that, and I think this one's often overlooked. It's even I think we overlook it when we talk about it a lot. Is if you're using a backup system that does like an inventory, right, of backups, Semantic Backup Exec or whatever. I think it's back to being called Veritas now, or whatever, was pretty notorious for having that backup database. And if you didn't have that, you couldn't actually restore sometimes. So, back up your backup server as well and get that offline. That way you can recreate that thing if an attacker gets it. So, because they're gonna go after it. I mean, it's
and test your backups. Hey,
right.
Testing your backups should be part of your disaster recovery policy and program, right? Like, you should be testing those all the time.
For sure. All right. I think that's it. Good session, guys. Anything else? You guys got a PSA? Got a soapbox you want to get on for a second?
I don't know, man. I stand on that backup soapbox pretty much all day long, every day. So I think I'm good. I don't know about you, Eric.
Yeah. And we just hammer that.
Is multi-factor, please, multi-factor,
please. Yeah. And we hammer that hard, folks, because like we've seen all the dope ass tech backups that are the best thing ever, and they're ransom proof and all that. Guess what? They still get destroyed, just like everything else. The only thing that doesn't get destroyed, those LTO tapes sitting in a vault in Iron Mountain, those discs that are offline, even in a closet somewhere else, right? They don't get destroyed.
Don't get me wrong, I hate tapes. I for years was, dealt with tapes and stuff. And I know Oscar knows this, but, dealt with an organization where we were doing a lot of DVD backups. We were backing a lot of data up to DVDs, and those things saved my butt. And not from a ransomware attack, but just we had a storage failure, like a really massive storage failure. Sure, it took forever, but we had the data and we were able to recover. So
let's go back one more. Optical platters. Remember those bad boys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but nobody
it's a CD
that.
in a plastic case is really all it was.
You remember mini disc? Do you remember mini disc, Eric? There were the little CDs that were in the case.
Yeah, I remember them.
Okay, optical platters were just big mini discs. They're like
big mini
the size of a book. Yeah.
I just used LTO tapes back in the day. They did save me from ransomware multiple times back when I had them too. Yeah. So Blu-rays, let's just all start putting all our data on Blu-rays.
Hey man, zip drives. I mean, I think you could get 100
zip drives
on those. Yeah.
Floppy disks. Yeah, you got this.
All right, good session, everybody. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, great weekend. We'll see you in a month.